Hey, welcome back to another episode of the She's Making an Impact podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Ngom. Have you ever wondered what it looks like to create an irresistible offer and how to actually sell from webinars, from stage? I've got just an incredible expert for you. Today's podcast, I'm going to tell you straight up, it is so jam-packed with gold. So I highly suggest you listen to this more than once and take notes, because you're getting like exact verbiage of what to say to make great offers, to make great conversions. So I brought in Colin Boyd. He helps experts, course creators, and coaches speak confidently on stage to sell without coming across as pushy or salesy. He's just brilliant at what he does, absolutely brilliant. And you're gonna hear that in today's episode. So we are gonna dive on in. Hey, Colin, welcome to the show.
Hey, great to be here, Rachel.
So excited you're here. So tell us a little bit about you and what you do.
Yeah, so I'm an Aussie. You can hear my accent.
Yep.
Based in Newport Beach with my two amazing kids and my amazing wife. Been here for about 4 years. But essentially, what brought me over here was an obsession with growing my business, growing my potential, and making an impact. And essentially what I do is I help people to create irresistible presentations so they get a flood of clients. And so that could be on webinar or on a virtual presentation or a live presentation. I've been a speaker for over 15 years. And my obsession is helping people get confident to sell, specifically sell, not just speak, but sell in a really like authentic, congruent, integrate way from a stage.
I love it. How did you get into that?
So I know for me, when I first started my coaching business, I was a life coach. I'm literally sitting at my desk. It's this old wooden desk and it's held up by phone books because I pulled it from the local like $2 store. And I was, as you can imagine, I'm flourishing in my coaching business at this moment. And I've got like one client and not knowing how on earth to grow this thing, but I had this big desire to make a difference. And what happened was I got a phone call on my landline and a friend of mine said, "Hey, I've got a presentation coming up that I can't do. It's free. Could you do it?" And this was the first time I'd ever even considered speaking. And I said yes. And I remember leading up to it, the night of the presentation, it was literally a dark and stormy night. And I was walking up the stairs with my wife, and I'm on her arm as opposed to, she being with me. I'm hanging on to her. The event organizer comes to me and is like, "Colin, you wouldn't believe this, biggest conference we've ever had, and we're all here to hear you speak." And so for me, this was bad news.
Right.
Because
no.
For me, I'm like, awesome. Just more people who are going to think that I'm an idiot. And, and I got up there, I did my presentation. There was about 137 people, the event organizer said, in the audience, and 125 of them gave me their personal details with the offer I made at the end of the presentation.
Wow.
And after that, I followed up, did a whole bunch of free coaching, like discovery calls. I signed 12 full-time coaching clients. And then 4 days later, a finance director from HP calls me and says, "Colin, loved your presentation. Can you speak at our next global conference in Kuala Lumpur?" And I'm like, let me check my diary first of all, on my calendar. But I didn't have my bookings out that far. So I was like, yeah, I'm totally free. And for me, what blew me away was that literally one presentation changed my life. And from there, I've never not had clients or been scrounging for clients, because that revelation of like, you get in front of the right audience with the right message in a leveraged fashion and make an irresistible offer, your life can change overnight. Yeah. And now that on virtual stages is, I think, amplified. And that's what we're seeing with our clients and with the industry.
Yeah, for sure. So are there any, like, what would be some of the differences between selling virtually and doing like a webinar versus selling on stage?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of them are technical, like literally just, the microphone, the video,
which I couldn't figure out today.
Yeah, totally. Like, there is so many similarities, because I think sometimes people think the thing that's stopping them is that, oh, I don't know how to work out the tech, or I don't know how to work out the technology. But that is really, I mean, I think when it comes down to it, the biggest difference is that, at the end, if you make an offer, you say, if you're in a live room, you'll be like, the form in front of you, let's just go through it together. And if you resonate with me and you want to take the next step, this is how you can take the next step. Where on a webinar, you go, hey, this is the URL you go here and join me inside. I'm looking forward to working with you. And so it's like, there's some technical like differences. Obviously, you can share your screen and do all that sort of stuff. But when it comes down to it, I think the skill of speaking and connecting and resonating with your audience on a deep level is the fundamental skill that can be used across virtual or live presentations.
Let's dive into that. How do you form that deep connection?
Yeah. Well, one of the kind of the secret sources that we use in our program and our methodologies is what we call infusion selling. And so infusion selling is this idea of rather than speaking and then doing an awkward pitch at the end, and where you get like comments from people going, hang on, I didn't realize this was a sales presentation, right? Rather than doing that, you actually do it in a way where you weave your selling throughout your speaking. And so you design content that doesn't just inform people and show them all the practical steps and overwhelm your audience. You actually design content that gets them to make a greater commitment to themselves and to the outcome that you can help them with. And how you do that specifically, like there's nine techniques that we use, but one of them is just asking people to make decisions throughout the presentation. We call them micro decisions. So they're like small little decisions that people make throughout the presentation, and they're designed in a specific way. But what they do is they create a desire around your content, as opposed to you just like sharing the drinking from the fire hose webinar that people do, or presentation where it's like, how do I dump as much content onto my potential clients so that they go, wow, this person knows so much. Imagine if I paid them money, imagine what I would get if I was to, work with them. And that's not the case, sadly. Most of the time, if you just overwhelm people with content as opposed to design it strategically, what's going to happen is the audience will just be like, I'm so overwhelmed. Can I just work through everything you've given me for the next 6 months? And then I'll come back and consider your program. Okay.
So we don't want to overwhelm. We don't want to teach too much. What are some of the elements then that you actually would include in the webinar?
Yeah. Well, for me, it's decisions. Like I said, like decisions throughout the presentation, as opposed to just content.
Can you give an example? What would that look like?
Yeah. I mean, one example is I would ask, so I'm thinking like this, I'm going, people need to identify where they're at in the journey they're on with what you help them with. Okay. So for example, let's say it's a specific idea that you're teaching them on. For example, one of the ideas that you would include is signature stories. Okay. So a signature story, and it's not a general signature story. It's a story that creates conversion. It's what I'm calling now, it's a new kind of phraseology that I'm using. It's called a conversion story. And a conversion story is a story that when you share it, it creates conversion. Okay. As opposed to just getting to know you story. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so if I was teaching signature story, and I was teaching it in a really specific way around creating a story that converts your audience into the main idea that you're helping them with, I would ask a question like this: on a scale of 1 to 10, how effective is your signature story right now moving your audience towards your offer? Is it a 10? Like they finish and they're like, oh my gosh, like that's what I need. Or they just go, oh, that's kind of an interesting story. And so where would you rate yourself? So I'll get people identify, they'll rate themselves. Another one is I'll get them to really engage in what's possible when they get this right. So for example, I would say, imagine 6 months from now, you have your conversion story dialed in. And every time you get on a virtual presentation, you get on a Facebook Live, you get on an Instagram Live, and you share your story, you get a flood of comments, and they're not just like great story. They're, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I need help with. Imagine what that would do for you, your confidence, and even your business when you have that dialed in. I want you to feel that. What's the first feeling that comes up when you think about doing that? Right? That's another question that creates a decision. Yep. And then you just literally ask people to make a decision. Like, is this an area that you would want to work on? Is this an area you want to see progress on? If it is, type the word commit or type the word story if you want to do that. So that's an example of some micro decisions that you can add in your presentation. And even for you, even for the listeners right now, thinking about that, what were you noticing was coming up in you when I was asking those questions? What about you, Rachel? What was coming up in you?
What was coming up for me is actually telling our listeners they better be taking notes and listen to this like 3 times, because you're literally giving like the exact verbiage of what you can say on a webinar to increase conversions.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh, this is good. I'm not taking notes because I want to be here with you, but I'm
totally.
Oh man, like I hope they're taking notes because this is such good stuff.
Yeah. So just can I just say just recently we had a student implement that methodology. He implemented a few other ones, but that was like one of the key ones. And his conversion rate went from 3% to 14%.
Shut up.
Like literally.
Wait, what did he implement? Which part?
Well, he implemented like a conversion story.
Okay.
And
can you give an example of what would a good conversion story be like?
Well, I've already told mine at the start.
Okay, so we're gonna go back and listen to this for the second time. Got it.
Totally. So a conversion story does 3 things. And this is what I want, your listeners to understand. A conversion story, first of all, it creates connection. Mm-hmm. And this is what most stories do. Like they'll create connection, and there's a sense of vulnerability in your story. So it's like you start out, you're struggling. Like you're not flourishing, you're not doing well, you're struggling. You're concerned, you have this desire to make a difference, but you don't know how to make a difference. Like you're in this place of difficulty. And when you do that, the audience starts to go, oh my gosh, like I kind of feel like that. Maybe,
me too. Yeah.
Maybe you're not sitting at the same wooden desk that I was at,
mm-hmm.
but you're thinking about your situation and going, gosh, like that's how I feel. Like I've got these big desires to make a difference, right? So the first element is connection. Mm-hmm. The second key element is credibility. And that's what a lot of people think their signature story is about as well. They think, oh no, it's about me showing them that I'm a credible source to be trusted. And they do that with like testimonials. They do that with, I've been featured in here. I've been working for this long. And they spend a lot of time on that. The problem with that, if you spend too heavy on that side, you actually end up repelling people because there's a lot of ego in that. And if you go too heavy on that, they'll be like, that's cool, but like you're a little bit of a douche. and I'm not sure if I'm really resonating with you.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right. So you have to create that balance.
Right.
You have to have that vulnerability of like difficulty, and you also have to have the credibility of victory. You have to have that transformational moment, that transformational journey, and the results. So you need to display it in a way that you need to share it in a way that does it effectively in the story. And then finally, and this is the secret sauce of a conversion story, is it has to be aligned with your core premise or your core idea that you want your audience to understand.
Okay.
And so what I mean by that is there's usually one key idea that if your audience gets, that will emotionally, mentally, and actively move them towards the thing that you can help them with. Mm-hmm. It's like the big domino. Once you knock over that one big domino, they're going to lean into that. One of my students just recently, she was doing webinars. She was doing pretty well. She was like hitting around $30,000. And she dialed in her core premise. And that was around, she really helps. She works with with hairdressers to really grow their business and actually create online courses with their skills and so forth. And she dialed in a core premise. Because the core premise is like the backbone. It's the core idea. And she literally, the next webinar she did $191,000.
Wow.
And it was because she changed the arrow that she shot. Mm-hmm. Like she pulled out the silver arrow and she lined that puppy up and just shot it. And that is the core premise. So everything's built around this core idea. So all the content, not just your signature story, but all the content is built around this core idea that if they believe that one idea, then that's the one idea that's going to help them move forward.
Can you give some examples of what that might look like?
So for me, my one idea is that you're one presentation away from the breakthrough you want in your business.
Okay.
Like that's my one idea. Like my whole business, like you could literally build like if you strip back my entire business, it's got one idea. That's it. It is that if you can create an irresistible presentation, and you can do it on virtual stages, you can put it on an automated webinar, you can do it on a live presentation, that thing will literally change the trajectory of your business. And then I have to prove that, by the way. Like I have to show examples, I have to tell my story, I have to share my clients' stories, like I have to build around that as well. And so for everyone, you've got to find that one idea that is so clear that, so it's not like, notice that idea is not, it's not like fancy.
Right.
Right. It's not, and it's not even that unique.
Right.
It's actually just a truth that when I can show enough examples around that, and then also remove the resistance that people have around getting good at that, then they're like, oh my gosh, I'm ready to do this. Because for example, like, I could say, like, look at every single main market leader in the marketplace. What do they use to grow their business? They either use an automated webinar, or they do a live webinar or a live launch, and all of it is built around a presentation.
Yep.
Right. So that's just an example of me showing, like, there's lots of examples out there. And so maybe you help people with Facebook groups. So your core premise could be that the number one way to create an engaged audience and convert them into clients is through Facebook groups. But you have to be able to prove that. And so when you're telling your signature story, if you can build that around your core premise, all of a sudden it starts to move towards embedding that idea in the audience's mind and suggesting it in a more palatable way.
Okay. Love it. So I have vulnerability and connection, credibility without being douchey. And I love that. And the core idea, the domino effect. So how much time would we spend there? And then what would the rest of the presentation look like?
Yeah, well, in terms of the like the signature story, typically you're gonna speak for between 3 to 5 minutes, I would say, with a signature story. And the revelation you need to have is that your signature story has nothing to do with you. And so what most people think is that they either go, I don't want to tell my story because I don't want to focus on me, right? They go, and so they kind of skim over it. They don't go deep in it, or they go the other end, and they're like, they get a bit obsessed with themselves and they tell their story for ages, and really only their mother would really care about that story.
Right.
Right. And so you've got to realize that you design your story with the filter in mind, the lens of going, when I'm telling my story, this is actually my client's story. And so you have to weave in language, emotions, experiences where your potential client, your audience would go, oh, that's like me. I felt like that. And emotions are universal. So maybe they haven't had the exact, experience that you've had, but they've felt like you have. They've thought thoughts that you have thought. And if you can embed that in your story, all of a sudden it becomes universal. And then they start going, wow, this person's like me. They've got the results I want to get. And I think they could help me, right? It starts to open up that touching their hearts right at the start.
Got it. So it's creating that element of like a me too, like you share something that they can really connect with.
Exactly. Yeah. And emotions and thoughts are the main things. You describe the specifics around you, but emotions and thoughts are the universals, right? Everyone's felt fear. Everyone's felt anxiety. Everyone's felt a lack of this. Everyone's felt like they weren't good enough. So if you can find moments where you hone in on that, they're going to be universal moments. It doesn't matter on the situation.
Got it. Okay. So we have our signature story and everything. How much teaching would you do? Yeah. Because I don't know about you, but like if someone signs up for a webinar, I don't want them just leaving with they heard a story and then they heard an offer. Like I want them to actually get something out of it. I don't want I never want to like waste somebody's time. Right. Yeah. So how do you make sure that they come and they get what they needed? And how much of that would be teaching?
Well, I think when it comes back to it, it's like, do we really understand what our audience needs?
Mm-hmm.
So we think our audience needs lots of practical steps.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is that if you give too many practical steps before they've exchanged money with you, you actually almost in a sense, you will overwhelm them, first of all, and you will actually distract them from really seeing a transformation. Now, I'm not saying don't be helpful, but what I am saying is understanding what your audience really needs. I'll give an example. I know for me, so I live in Newport Beach in California. I'm an Aussie, right? So I grew up in Australia. I wanted to move to America for about 5 years. And so do you know what I did? I researched. I went on Reddit. I spoke with friends who'd moved countries. I researched on the internet. I took people out for coffee. I did all this research, right? And had all these like different steps and different processes in doing it, like learned all this stuff. And at the end of that couple of years, I was more confused on how to move from Australia to America than I was at the start, like way more confused.
Yep.
And then it came to a point where I was having a conversation with my wife and we're like, do we really want to do it? And we're like, yeah, we do. Like, this is the moment. This is the time. Like, there was this motivation of urgency that came up. And what I did was I decided to hire an international immigration consultant, an international lawyer, and an international accountant. And literally within 6 months, I was living in America.
Wow.
Like business setup, functioning in America within 6 months. So for like a couple of years, I'm
5 years, 6 months.
Exactly. For 5 years, my kids call it kerfuffling around. I'm kerfuffling around doing nothing really and researching. But what I actually needed was I just needed a process that worked and I needed skin in the game. And so the reason why I share that is because your clients are kerfuffling around right now. Like your potential clients, sorry, not your clients, your audience. Your audience are kerfuffling. That's what they're doing. And they would have different words for it. But they're jumping on free webinars, they're jumping on free things, which is all part of the journey, by the way. Like there's nothing wrong with doing, listening to a free podcast, all that sort of stuff. But really, when you think about it, the thing that they actually need is they need a simple process, but it has to be infused with a great level of commitment.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the cleanest currencies of commitment is money.
Yep.
And when I say cleanest, I mean it's the cleanest way to measure.
Yeah.
So there's time, there's money, there's energy, there's attention. But for me, one of the cleanest ways to measure commitment is money. And so when you ask for money and make an offer, all you're saying is saying, would you like to lift your level of commitment to the problem you want to solve? And if you do, then this is the money that represents that commitment level. And then when you do that, I will be able to functionally work with you to help you to implement a system that is actually proven and works.
Got it. Okay. So we're in the webinar. We're getting ready to make the transition to the offer. How do we do that without being super awkward? I mean, like, all right, here's my offer, bye.
Yeah, totally. Well, I think first of all, it comes back to realizing that when you're making an offer, you're not trying to sell something.
Mm-hmm.
So most people think that selling is like pushy and sleazy. And this is one of the reasons why a lot of people would come and work with me is they're like, I don't want to be the pushy, salesy, sleazy kind of, like salesperson, right? They go, I want to be able to share my offer in a way that feels good, feels integrate, and so forth. And so the first thing you need to do is, first of all, shift your thinking, is to realize that when you make an offer, you are offering your audience a sacred place of transformation. And so rather than going, hey, here's something that I can help you with, and you have to give me this money, It's, I've created a space where you can see transformation. This is the space I've created. And to enter that space, because there's a sacredness to this space, to enter this space, there is a commitment that you must have. And that is represented by money, time, attention, whatever the currencies are, right? So to get over the wall, to enter that sacred space, that's what is represented. And so energetically, when you make this shift and realize that you're not trying to sell something, you're offering a place of transformation, all of a sudden you're going to start to feel differently right there. Because are you feeling this? Like you're not trying to push them into something. You're saying, I'm happy to welcome you into this circle if you're willing to make the commitment to yourself. You're not even making it to me. You're making the commitment to yourself, and that currency is represented by time, money, energy, attention. And that's what this is what it looks like. And so, first of all, that's the big shift. Specifically for me, like there's so many different transitions that I use or work with.
Can you give us like your top 3?
Yeah, I think top 3. That's a lot. Let me give you one that would be really helpful for people to do. So because 3 is going to overwhelm people. Right, and my goal is to help you. Is to help the audience, right? Yeah. So one way to do it is move them into the future self of who they're going to be. So for example, you could say, I want you to move forward maybe just, 3 days from now. And I want you to imagine yourself doing the things that we've been talking about, what you'll be noticing, what you'll be seeing, what you'll be experiencing. And I want you to notice how you feel in that space, right? And you would describe it, those specific things of what you've been talking about in the training, in the webinar. And then I want you to move forward maybe 3 months from now. And I want you to notice yourself showing up as the version of who you knew you wanted to be. So you're going deep into this future pace. So right, it's a future pace experience. And then you move forward maybe 12 months from now, and you're experiencing who you are in that future version of yourself. And I want you to come back to right now. And I want you to ask yourself, who is that future self? Who's the person that you're envisioning right now? Because that is actually you. And the question is are you committed to becoming that person right now? Are you committed to that future? Because if you are, and if you resonate with me, then I'd love to share with you what those next steps look like in how to bridge that gap to become that person and see those results. So before I do that, I do need to be clear that what I'm about to share isn't going to be for everyone. It's not going to be for, and you might talk about who it's not for. And what I'm trying to do here is I'm actually trying to create resistance in people around core values. And so what I mean by that is I will articulate, if you aren't committed to seeing results with your clients, I don't want to even share with you this system, because you're going to sell stuff and your clients, you're not going to be committed to your clients. So you have to be integrate to you're committed to your clients. So what I'm doing here is essentially I'm articulating values that the audience will most probably feel, but I'm also checking, I'm saying, hey, you've got to have these values, because what I'm about to share will change your life. So I'm creating anticipation, and what you're about to share will change your life. And then you go into your offer and you unpack your offer. But really that's a future pace experience. Is like you take them into the future, you ask them who that is, if they're going to be committed to being that person. It's not, are you committing to my program? It's, right, is that the person you want to be? And if it is, and you resonate with me, then I'd love to share with you the next steps. And so it's not, and I'd love to sell you my program. I'd love to share you the next steps to help bridge that gap. But it's not going to be for everyone. So you've actually got to articulate what the values are of the people that see results in your program. And then you can move into sharing your offer. Oh,
so good. Okay. Boom. So then elements of an offer.
Elements of an offer.
Yeah. How do you create an offer that converts?
Well, first of all, an offer that converts. I always do the holy moly, this is insane test. So you have to look at your offer and go, if you were your client, would you go, holy moly, this is insane. Like, this is such a good offer. You actually have to feel like you're getting ripped off. So you know how like people always have this fear of like, I don't want to rip off people. I don't want to rip off my clients. And that's a great fear. That just means that you're not a psychopath, right? It's a good indicator, right? Because if you don't have that, you've probably got something else going on. So if you've got that, that's really great. But I think you should get to the place where your offer, and I'm not saying it has to be cheap, but what I'm saying is like, it's so good that you actually feel almost ripped off making it. You're like, oh gosh, like it hurts to offer it. Yeah. Because it's so good. And so first of all, that's the first like kind of big piece. But for me, when I'm creating an offer, we've got this whole process called the Irresistible Offer Template. The big idea is you got to have like a obviously your program name has got to be attractive. You got to have a clear outcome. You got to have like a clear pathway, your modules. You got to have you got to make sure that your bonuses are the right bonuses that actually address objections. And to be honest, I think the bonuses are the offer. Most people stack bonuses in because they see people throw 50 bonuses in.
Right.
And they think, oh, I'm supposed to offer bonuses because everyone offers bonuses. No. The bonuses are the offer.
Explain.
So what I mean by that is your bonuses should be so good that people go, I would buy this entire offer just for those bonuses.
Okay.
So for example, like for us, right, with our Self from Stage Academy, one of the bonuses is a live training, like a 2-day live experience. Now, when I used to like be more, I didn't actually have a digital course. I used to sell my live trainings more than I sell my entire program. Mm-hmm. Like that wasn't even, so for example, I used to sell my live trainings for more than I sell our program with all of the elements, like the community, the coaching, the live experience, the products, all that sort of stuff. And so for me, when I make my offer, I'm going, this live event, people used to pay more just to come to just the live event, right? And so all of a sudden the offer becomes for me like irresistible to me, right? Because I'm like, this is really good. I'm impressing myself. And then, but so your bonuses need to be worth the entire offer itself. And so they need to have desire, but they also need to reduce resistance. And so, for example, like one of our bonuses is an entire webinar funnel. So some people say, I don't understand how to like put together the tech and do all the emails and the whole funnel. And it's like, okay, well, we've built it for you. Mm-hmm. And all you have to do is just watch this short training and then just download all the templates and just start using it. And so it's like, that's a bonus that reduces the resistance that people have in getting started.
So it's like sense? You mentioned objections. So like think of an objection that they would have. I don't understand tech and how to do this. Okay, I'm going to offer this bonus where I actually did it for you.
Correct.
Which reduces the friction or whatever. So it actually gets them to make the decision easier.
Yes, it takes the resistance because selling is just two things. Selling is increasing desire for the outcome you help them with and reducing the resistances that would stop them to make that decision. That's all selling is. And if you do that in a way that that they resonate with you, and then you share a really integrated offer and a process, it's a beautiful experience, I think, in exchange, a beautiful exchange that can happen there. So and then that you do an irresistible offer because essentially there's 3 elements that you have to dial in. There's only 3. There is understanding your audience deeply, creating a message that really resonates and does those things of like creating desire, reducing resistance, and an irresistible offer. You do those 3 things and you've got a profitable coaching business, course creation business, whatever it is, whatever business you've got.
Awesome. Let's say you're doing a webinar and it's converting, like it's okay, like 3 to 5%. What are some of the things that you would tweak first to increase conversions?
Well, most of the time people have too much how-to content in there. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying don't be helpful, but it's reframing what helpful is. Mm-hmm. Comes back to my story of transitioning from Australia to the US. Mm-hmm. I didn't need more steps I actually needed greater commitment. And so the first filter I'm looking over people's content is going, is this webinar, is the content just content that people have gone back to their own course and pulled content out of their course and just gone, this is awesome content, I'm going to put it in my webinar, and they're going to go, this is so great that if I give this person money, then this would be amazing. Like, imagine what I get when I pay, as opposed to being free. So for me, my first thought is I'm actually trying to reduce people's content. Now, when I say reduce that, I mean reduce all of the steps. As soon as you get into too detailed steps, like way too detailed, you overwhelm your audience, and then you actually lose the sale.
How many steps should there be?
None. So
None.
when I say none, I mean, like, definitely teach people, well, maybe one. You could teach one process. I think one process is helpful. More than one is just overwhelming for people, because they're not going to do it, because they don't have enough commitment. Like, they could hear the best idea ever. They'll literally do nothing with it. It was like me. That's what I was doing. I heard great content and I was doing nothing with it because I didn't have the commitment there. And it wasn't until I fully committed that I actually implemented it and I got the help I needed.
Right.
And so we're almost doing people a disservice when we give too much how-to content, because it just overwhelms. If you want to be helpful, give them one thing that they could implement, that could be easy, that they could do, where they would go like, oh, I'm really starting to see the results in this. And so that's helpful. That's helpful. The rest of the content really needs to be about helping them make a decision and move forward in their commitment, because that is actually being really helpful for them.
Got it. What are some mistakes that you see people making when they're putting together an offer?
An offer?
Offer, webinar, everything we've talked about. Big mistake.
Some of the big mistakes is, I'm trying to think about other ones that I haven't covered. I think that they don't ask questions. So one of the big mistakes is that they think it's about like drinking from the fire hose. So they stack in way too much content in their presentation. And so your content really needs to have a nice balance of great stories, case studies, like key concepts, etc., but also some good questions that you're asking the audience to engage. Like, for example, one of our students recently, like, she was doing some live videos and so forth. She's done some video trainings before. She used to get like, I don't know, like in a training series, she'd get like 100 comments on one of her video launches. And then she just adds more strategic questions throughout it. And she'll get more, and she said she got 1,000 comments in the next presentation. It was like insane. Like, and first of all, that's great juice for Facebook and all that sort of stuff. But the biggest thing is that she just engaged the audience more. So I think, one of the big mistakes is that they think the presentation is about them just providing content, but we got to realize the presentation is about the audience. That's all it's about. Right. And so we have to sit in the audience's seat and go, how would they experience this content, as opposed to what content do I just want to share? And then asking strategic questions, sharing.
What would an example of a strategic question be?
Well, kind of like what I mentioned before, with like the questions of, on a scale of 1 to 10, where would you be? Like, give me some ideas on a scale of 1 to 10. Like, even your listeners right now, I would love them to take an action after they hear this podcast, not just to be a normal podcast that they hear and go, oh, that was cool. I would love them to do a Facebook Live this afternoon and to share their story, and one idea, one helpful idea that they have learned in their trainings or they share with their clients. And then I want them to ask that question. I want them to go, on a scale of 1 to 10, where would you rate yourself with this idea right now? So, and ask people, go comment down below on a scale of 1 to 10, where would you rate yourself? And then secondly, I want you to imagine what that would be like if you were to implement this 6 months from now. Write the first feeling that comes to mind that would give you when you implement that. And if that's something you can commit to, type the word commit down below. So I would get them to do that. I want everyone to do that. It will take you like 5 minutes. And then most people will watch the replay, which is fine. Leave it for a couple of days and just notice some of the engagement that happens. Notice the difference that it makes. Because what we're doing is we're putting the audience first in terms of we're actually seeing the audience as opposed to just presenting content.
Right. Amazing. What's one of the best books you've read?
Oh, I really, really liked Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself.
Mm-hmm. Joe Dispenza.
Yeah, Joe Dispenza. Mm-hmm. I really liked that. That was actually an audiobook that I listened to recently. I mean, I love all stuff around like faith and philosophy and just like, breaking through. I really liked Expert Secrets. I thought that was a great book by Russell Brunson.
So good. All of his. I'm like, oh, this is great.
Yeah, it's an amazing book. Yeah, I mean, the book that started everything for me was Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki.
Yep.
That was like back in the day. So
I was just explaining that book to my mom. I was like, Mom, this is what you need to do.
Totally. At the moment, I'm reading Alex Hormozi's book, $100 Million Offers. That's a great book. So yeah, that's some of the books that I'm reading and love.
Awesome. What does it mean to you to make an impact?
To make an impact. For me, it means helping people to access their potential. And so my goal, the reason why I run my program is to make it easier for people to access the potential that's on their life. That's an impact for me.
Amazing. Where can we connect with you?
Instagram is a great spot. So, which I'm just at Colin Boyd, ColinBoyd. I'm quite active on there. I've got a podcast myself, which is The Expert Edge. So you just search Expert Edge in iTunes. And I think if people want like some really practical steps or some templates, we've talked about story. So I've got a story template, it's called Sell with Story Guide. So if you go to sellwithstoryguide.com, that's probably like something really helpful and useful that will help them to map out their signature story more effectively and then start sharing it and so forth. So sellwithstoryguide.com.
Amazing. Colin, thank you so much for being on the show. This was so good.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks, Rachel.